The lady, the runaway kid, and 6. They're all connected, and today we're gonna find out how. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the mall, the cheeriest place on earth! Yeah! With the release of the latest DLC for Little Nightmares, The Residence, we may have some answers to questions we've long been awaiting for. But are these the answers we've been wanting? How about we find out? So why not start at one of the biggest reveals? And that's the lady was the one all along that could turn the children into gnomes. Which means we can also assume she's the one that put that enchanted spell on the furnace in the hideaway, keeping the gnomes running the mall, and in turn, able to look at what they once were. And unfortunately, this is exactly what happens to the runaway kid. But it gets worse. The last time we see the runaway kid is beside a sausage. The exact same sausage in the exact same room we find in 6's campaign. With the achievement, we'll meet again. This refers back to the moment when he gave 6 the bread in the prison, and even after everything he's been through, he holds up the sausage for her, hoping that she might recognize him as that same child. But it all went a bit wrong for you, didn't it, mate? So in one of the most questionable moves by the developers, they decided to kill the runaway kid off. A lot of people weren't very happy when it came to the ending of the runaway kid. Oh, what's that? You managed to escape the clutches of the granny and befriended the gnomes? Well, how about you get turned into one and then die as one? I was more shocked that I was right about it, even down to him being recently transformed into a gnome. Play the clip. All of the gnomes she encounters don't actively help her, except for one. And what if that gnome didn't know any better? What if the child had just recently transformed into a gnome? And what if that gnome was the runaway kid? So I don't get anything for that? No? Oh. Right then. But just like everything else in Little Nightmares, there's more to this than there first appears. For the runaway kid did not die in vain. In fact, without his sacrifice, 6 could not and would not have succeeded. But we'll get to that later. You see, I know how to do a good video. We hold that to the end, so you watch all the way through. The other reveal that this DLC had to offer us was the lady's reflection, showing us that in the mirror, an old haggard face stares back at her. But if we look closely, we can see that the lady's face isn't haggard, like the reflection shows. But to help us understand what's really going on here, we're gonna have to look at the Little Nightmares comic books, the only other place we've seen mirrors. In issue 2, a group of children stumble upon an old house, and within its walls are huge mirrors that tower over them. When the children look into these mirrors, they see the versions of themselves they have always wanted to become. Stronger, taller, their deepest desires. And through the mirrors, their bodies take that form. It would appear that mirrors in the Little Nightmares universe have special powers. And this mirror isn't showing her what she looks like. It's showing her what she has become. And let's find out why. How about we get into some theory territory? This DLC didn't reveal much about the mall, but it did allow us to glimpse into the private life of the lady. In the residence, there are 2 portraits that are found nowhere else in the mall but here, and we can presume are of the lady. No mask covering her face, like the one in the restaurant. And also confirms what I had suspected, that she was indeed at one point a geisha, as shown here wearing a geisha's hair and makeup. The lady was once beautiful. She adored the way she looked, surrounding herself with portraits capturing her beauty, and mirrors so she could gaze upon herself. She had trained as a geisha. For her, this was a way to prove how beautiful she was to everyone. But for whatever reason, she didn't marry, and eventually retired to become the governess of the mall, looking after and teaching the children. But that was not where her interests lay. There was one thing that the lady did not want to lose, and that was her looks. She knew, like with all things, youth is fleeting. So she started searching for an answer, and an answer she found. The books in her library could have held the key, ancient books with dark magic. When asked about the lady's powers, this is what the creators of the game had to say. The lady has been in the mall for a long time. She's learned all sorts of unpleasant things during her residence. It's best that we don't scratch the surface. I think it's very likely she learned a way to keep her youthful looks, but at a cost. To prolong her life and beauty, there must be a sacrifice. And that sacrifice was to be the children she was supposed to care for. She would imprison them and steal their youth, adding it to hers. And what remained of the children was the gnomes we see all around the mall. And because of this, we know why the gnomes leave their scribbled drawings everywhere. They're warnings for the next runaway kids that pass by. The security eyes to watch out for, and even the janitor with his eyes scribbled out, letting the next runaways know that the janitor can't see. And with no children to look after anymore, the lady banished the granny down to the depths of the mall. So lonely was she driven that when she first encounters the runaway kid, all she wants to do is get her hands on him, and literally drowning him in love. But we went into great detail about the granny in a previous video, so if you want to see that, you should click on the link at the top. You should definitely watch it, it's very good. But as time went on, something started to happen to the lady's reflection. The lady herself wouldn't age, but the reflection she found staring back at her in the mirror would. The longer she continued to prolong her life and perform these acts, the more haggard and twisted the face would get. All the mirrors she had surrounded herself with now showed the monster she had become. That same face would stare back at her, but what really kills her inside is the fact that she will never be able to gaze upon her own beauty ever again. Enraged, she destroyed every mirror she could find so that she and no one else could see the monster she had become. Until one did. These two had crossed paths before, at the end of the hideaway, and it was made abundantly clear that the lady knew he was there. So why didn't she turn him into a gnome right then and there? Because there's something about her she doesn't want us to know. She loves children. Hard to believe with her track record, but it might be true. Some of you might be thinking, this is a little bit far-fetched. But come on here, we're looking at a woman who literally turns children into gnomes. She doesn't want to hurt the children if she doesn't have to. She sees what she's doing as a means to an end. Just as we would buy bacon at the supermarket, we don't think about the pig that's going to be slaughtered for that bacon. And it could be that the lady has also detached herself in a similar way. Her own vanity got in the way of those feelings. In one scene in the residence, we see her surrounded by dolls. And by getting her to turn around, we can see that she's nursing one too. And not just that, but the shadow children as well. These figures wear the same porcelain mask as the lady. Nowhere else are these children found, and every time we've seen the lady perform some kind of magic, she's been wearing this mask. So these have to be her creations. And there's one thing we may have completely overlooked. Her humming. It's quiet and calming. It's a lullaby. A song you'd sing to a child. Could it be what the lady wanted just as much as her eternal youth was to have a child to call her own? For the longest time we had concluded that Six was the daughter of the lady, but now we have answers from a reputable source. Along with the release of the DLC, there was an interview published by Tarsier Studios, the game's developers. They answered some cherry-picked questions from their Twitter account, and it looks like finally we have an answer to that question. Is Six the lady's daughter? And the verdict is... no, they're not related. I know, right? Bloody disappointing. This is the answer they gave to the question, is Six related to the lady? We get this question fairly often, and it seems the majority of people want there to be some sort of mother-daughter combo. I don't know what to say about the general feelings we all have about our mothers, but I can say that I was once trapped on a train for half an hour, and none of the passengers were my mother. Maybe it's what we expect of drama after a lifetime of reading Joseph Campbell, Sophocles, or the person that started the whole tradition, George Lucas. But the reality is that these two characters have been thrown together by forces beyond their control. The child wants to escape, and the adult wants to keep the child trapped forever. How people see that as a mother-daughter relationship, I just don't know. So if Six isn't the girl in the portrait with the lady, then who is she? Could this girl perhaps be the runaway girl from the start of the Runaway Kids campaign? In the same interview, they did bring her up. So maybe she did hold some importance, but it appears we're not going to be seeing from her anytime soon, as we came to the conclusion that she was eaten by a leech, leaving her flashlight behind for the runaway kid to pick up. But here's my thoughts on that matter. I think it's highly likely that the girl in this portrait is that runaway girl. Her hair's about the right length, and if she's in the same portrait as the lady, they must hold some importance to each other. And there's another connection that's quite hard to see. If you look at the light from the torch that the runaway kid has, you can very faintly see an eye. And we all know by now that this eye symbol is the trademark of the lady. And that same torch can be used by shining its light on the eye to open doors in the residence. So why would the runaway girl have a torch that has the symbol of the lady? And that's because I think they were related. But now let's get back to 6. So from this answer, we can conclude that 6 was indeed locked away in the depths, possibly with the hanging man. But maybe the reason for her confinement wasn't because the lady was jealous of her beauty, but because 6 herself isn't an ordinary child. I mean, what child gets so hungry they eat an innocent gnome? A runaway kid. Or for that matter, a grown woman. Well, when Little Nightmares was in development, its working title was Hunger. And if there's something about 6 that's definitely abnormal, it's that. And is it possible that Little Nightmares is to revolve around 6? 6 was destined to take the lady's place, and she knew this. She tried everything in her power to stop her, and she would have succeeded too, if it weren't for one chance encounter. But there's still a few questions left unanswered. Why did this mirror hurt the lady, but this one didn't? Every time we've seen the lady use her powers, she's been wearing the mask. And whether it's been slamming doors, picking up 6, or creating her own shadow children, there's always been a dark aura around the things affected. So if this power was to be reflected back at her, it would make sense for it to be a brilliant white and also damage her. The only reason she's not affected here is because she's not wearing that same mask. But the better question is, how did 6 know to use the mirror against her? And for that matter, traverse the length of the moor to find the lady? It wasn't a coincidence. The secret lies in 6's hunger. 6 doesn't just eat the things she gorges herself on. Oh no, that's far too simple for Little Nightmares. She absorbs its essence, their being. As seen at the end of 6's campaign, by consuming the lady, she obtains her powers. If you remember earlier on, 6 devoured a rat that got itself caught in a trap. And it was because of this rat that 6 learned how to navigate the moor's tight spaces and pipes. And the lady knew of 6's powers. Which is why this scene right here is so important. The lady knew the runaway kid had discovered her weakness. So she transformed him into a gnome, thinking that 6 wouldn't be able to find him and her secret safe. She was so close to stopping 6, but she never counted on the chance meeting between the two of them. It was because the runaway kid saw the powers that the mirrors had on the lady that 6 learned to use the mirror to defeat her. And in the end, the runaway kid's death wasn't in vain after all. But this leaves us with even more questions. Why was 6 brought to the moor? The ferryman in the comics that brought her there also makes an appearance in the lady's quarters, so we can confirm this as canon. He seems to appear at the person's highest point of fear. In the first issue of the Little Nightmares comic, a child decides to take his hand rather than to be taken by another monster known as the North Wind. He chose to take Fear's hand, just as 6 did before being spotted by the crowd. But why would a power like this take 6 to the moor, as well as the other children? And for that matter, who's this character inside of 6's suitcase? And I actually managed to find this character in some really early concept art for Little Nightmares. Could this being have some sort of relation to 6? And on the last page of issue number 2 of the comic, could that character be between Fear and the North Wind? And for that matter, who are they even working for? Jesus! There's still so little we know about the Little Nightmares universe. And until more is revealed to us, tantalizing piece by tantalizing piece, we're left to wonder. So there you have it, guys. There really wasn't too much to grasp from this DLC, apart from showing the lady's true reflection. And I tried my best to pull as much information as I could out of all these different sources to make a coherent story. And of course, I mean, if you've got your own theories, leave them in the comments below. I love reading them. But going back to that interview just for a second, we can see that this won't be the end of Little Nightmares. And even though it might be the end of the DLC for Little Nightmares, maybe we'll get a sequel. And that's something that I cannot wait for. So So guys, thank you so much for your patience. I've been trying to work on this one just a little bit longer. There's so many different theories you could make out of all of the resources given to us. You could say that the lady was actually old and haggard, and by looking into the mirror, she saw her deepest desire, and that was her youthfulness. Just like with the kids in the comic books. However, when that swap was made and she became youthful again, her reflection showed back her true self. And now she could no longer gaze upon her beauty, as her true old appearance would just stare back at her in all of the mirrors, which made her, well, a little bit angry and upset. This, of course, being a social commentary on how you perceive yourself. It doesn't matter what other people see, but how you see yourself. That's what matters. And also in the comic books, there's a character that bears a stunning resemblance to our hanging man, belt buckle and all, which could be the creature responsible for distorting the views inside the mirrors. And if that's the case, there's a very high chance that the lady had some dealings with him. And from the looks of it, he didn't fare too well. Really, this theory video should have been about the lady turning the children into gnomes, but we already covered that in one of our previous theory videos. So with this one, I wanted to speculate a little bit more and possibly create a narrative between Six, the lady, and the runaway kid that would work together while using all the evidence we have. I really have no idea what to expect from the future of Little Nightmares, but if it's anything like what we've already gotten in terms of quality, I can't wait to see what they come out with. I've enjoyed so much playing the game and putting together all these theories too. And thank you again, guys, for all the support you show these videos. Because god damn it, they take like so long to make. Ugh. And of course, you can click on these videos all up here to check out my playthroughs of Little Nightmares and even other theory videos that if you haven't seen, you should definitely watch. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.